Hi, dear participants. Very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this webinar today afternoon. And my name is Kiran, and I'll be your host this afternoon. Today, we're going to talk about how to, find out how secure your organization really is, especially during these challenging times using Microsoft Security Workshop. And our speaker for this afternoon is Mr. Ajit Mohanraj, who heads the cloud division at New Wave Computing. And this session is scheduled to run for 45 minutes, starting with a session from Mr. Ajit, and then we'll end with a Q&A session. So all the participants will remain muted, and you may raise your hand on the chat panel should you have any issues in the audio or video. So I would like to invite Ajit sir to take this session forward. Ajit sir, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Kiran. Am I audible first?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Wonderful. So Kiran, just keep me true in case I'm not audible or there's a line problem. Please don't hesitate to jump in and ask me to go back, right? So good
Right, sir.
afternoon. Welcome everyone, like he said. And I have a really interesting packed agenda for the next, I would say 45 to 50 minutes. So first and foremost, thank you for coming here because you could have been anywhere between 3 to 4, but you chose to spend this time with us. So really, really very humble and very privileged. So I'm hoping that at the end of these 45 to 50 minutes, it's going to be time well spent with us. So the topic of today, as you see out there, is to basically share with you in terms of what we are conducting for organizations, what is known as the Microsoft Security Threat Workshop. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that workshop, and I'm also going to lay the ground for you, for a lot of y'all who are currently on Office 365 or M365. What can you do next, right? After these workshops, after we have run these workshops with you. So that's just the agenda that I'm going to set up. And I'd love to start with this, this particular quote from John Chambers. So true that there are two types of companies: those who have been hacked and those who don't yet know they've been hacked. I thought that was very, 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 very interesting, because if you look at it, he's not wrong. Because if you look at the statistics, for example, if you talk about the advanced persistent threats, for example, right, and we are all aware of these sleepers who hang around on the network, on an average, right, there have been intruders who've been in your network for the last 146 days, right, not been found yet, right. So the question sometimes you've got to ask yourself is that how certain are you that there isn't an active sleeper in your network, right? That's number one. Number two, the other statistics also tells us that the weakest point, and I think we all know this, but we kind of think it happens to others, but the weakest point is your end user's credentials. And that is sometimes when you have multiple applications and maybe you have multiple passwords and access to it, they tend to write it in their phones, save it under a password name or write it on yellow stickers or whatever it is. So the whole question is then, that becomes the single most weakest link for people to come into your network, right? And 63% of all intrusions have really been traced back to weak credentials. So the question I have for you is that, have you implemented something like a single sign-on so that they don't have these multiple usernames and passwords floating everywhere? And you might also want to implement something like a multi-factor authentication, or have you also implemented this control in such a way that depending on where the user is, what device he's coming in on, is it a registered, non-registered device or jailbroken, you want to basically allow access, deny, limited access, maybe challenge him with an MFA, or even force him to rechange passwords. All of that good stuff is really the kind of guard or the protection that you need to address those kind of threats. And of course, okay, this talks about 3.8 million, but the point is, if there is a breach of some sort in your whole setup, what is the cost of that data breach in your organization, right? I mean, I was talking to a very large farmer in Bangalore, and we were doing a discussion about exactly this topic. And he was saying that if somebody gets hold of our drug trials and our drug medications, right, the damage is not in lakhs, it's in multiples of crores. Because I was told that I was educated by the CIO. He said, Rajat, do you know that to come out with a drug, it takes a 7-year period, right? That's from year 1 to year 7. And if somebody picks up information in year 4 or year 5, and if supposing they manage to pick up that information, they are that much closer to the end game. And it costs a standard $1 billion, 1B for Bangalore, $1 billion to come out with this. So that's where the likes of Pfizer and all of this stuff spend that kind of money. So if those things get compromised, big trouble, right? So in your own organizations, we're not pharma companies, but if somebody gets hold of customer information or any IP or drawing or design files that you have to think about what is the cost of that data breach in your organization. And the reason why this is happening is very simple, because everybody knows about this whole digital transformation going on, right? And we're all into this for the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years. And what was the problem? I mean, earlier on, before all this digital happened, your data center was really the four corners of your data center server room, wherever it was, right? So all your information was lying there. People used to come to the office to work. They had desktops and things like that. So if you didn't come today, I knew you were not coming in. You were not going to be able to log in because you had to come in here, right? But now, thanks to mobility, what's happened is that I don't see you, and yet you're going to be accessing that corporate resource which I have to protect in my inside my perimeter, so-called perimeter. And I have to make sure that you are who you say you are, right? So identity becomes very, very important because you have moved away from my line of sight. And not only that, you're coming in on a multitude of devices, right? And because of those multitude of devices and people wanting to work very, very well, I also have to make some of my enterprise applications natively available on your endpoint devices. So whether it's an Android or iOS, I want you to give that familiar native feel, right? Pinch and zoom and things like that. And by doing that, I'm basically making sure you're very productive. But as an IT guy, I'm very scared that on that endpoint device, what stops you from doing a copy paste from my apps and picking up all my orders from SAP and pasting it maybe in your own mail and sending it off. So I've got to also manage not just the device, I've also got to manage the app, and I've got to make sure that your identity is rock solid because you're out of sight, right? And the third is, as the users are going out and interacting with partners and customers on their customers, etc., they're sharing and exchanging information and data, right? Now, again, as an IT guy, I don't know where you are, but I want to make sure that I want to give you some control in two ways. Number one is either I allow you to send, I assist you to send documents, let's say, to a prospective customer, and you might want to put some rights on those documents to say that this particular document, he can only read it. He can't print it, he can't forward it, or it expires within 7 days of the end user, whoever I'm sending it to, right, outside my organization or even inside my organization. Or secondly, I'm not going to wait for you to decide that, because sometimes a lot of users inadvertently send some very sensitive information out. So is there a way in which I can classify that information, right, depending on what is the context or the content, and give it business labels, highly confidential, confidential, public, whatever it is. And according to the labels, have a policy that's going to be straight away enforced. So if your end user, wherever he is in a coffee shop, is accidentally inadvertently trying to send some information out, I need my, sort of my DLP situation or my data leakage prevention story to kick in, right? Because you're out of sight for me as an IT guy. So I need to make sure that whenever you share data, you're safe about it. And the fourth thing is, of course, we all know this in terms of cloud, and your end users probably are, you might say as an IT head that we are only going to be using Salesforce, we're going to use Office 365, and these are just the two or three sanctioned apps, SaaS apps that we're allowing in the organization. And you and I know that that's not just the only SaaS apps that people are going to be using. Again, not that they're doing anything mischievous, but for example, if there's a very simple calculator, right, or if and I want to download it, right, I will download that calculator because I need it, right? Maybe an insurance calculator or a EMI calculator. But unknown to your user, that particular piece of software that was lying in the App Store or the Google Play Store is actually from one of these Russian or Ukraine or Chinese hackers, right? And what's happening is, at the moment that SaaS application is loaded onto the end device, he is able to jump in from your device and then jump back into my perimeter into the data center, right? So I've got to be able to not only see that whatever the sanction applications are the only applications that are being used in the organization, but a tool has to also help me by saying that these are the 7 or 8 or 9 SaaS applications that are not sanctioned running. What do you want me to do with it, right? So that's what the cloud piece of the puzzle as well. So digital really has expanded the data center edge beyond just your 4 parameters, and we really need to secure everything at every little layer. Now, somebody can start with the big bang approach, or you choose your entry point as to where you think your trouble spot is, right? So, and the reason why we have to live with this new security paradigm is exactly what I just said. Identity now is becoming your new firewall, not that perimeter firewall that you have on your edge center, because wherever your user is, if he's got weak credentials, right, that's where the entry point and that's where your edge is, right? If you don't protect the identity, in a sense, you're allowing somebody to come through. Two, devices really are the new parameter, right? Whatever are those devices that they are using, iPad, phone, because that's a weak link from where everybody comes in. And in this day and age, unlike the earlier days, I have to assume that I'm breached. So if I'm going to assume that I'm breached, I need to be able to know at any point in time what's going on. both with my interactions with my data, with the information that's happening, and the sessions that I need to know, because I want to assume that I'm going to be breached every time. So that's an assumed breach security model. And how do I basically have tools and technology and automation and a little bit of machine learning to help me out to know that something is wrong here, right? And that's really what Microsoft is going to be able to do for us. So the question I normally put up here is like, when did you last do a sort of a threat check? And I'm not talking about a VAPT testing of your network from outside, but really done a threat check on your email, specifically since we are in a Microsoft discussion here, in terms of your email and your data and your identity surrounding your Office 365 or your M365 that you have, right? And that's what we are offering to do, right? We're willing to come in and actually run a security threat workshop, which Microsoft has designed and enabled all partners to run, again, at no cost to you, right? So that's, and I will talk about what the engagement is all about, but the whole idea is to quickly get, have a view. We run it for about 2 weeks, right? And onto your Office 365 or M365, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to come out and tell you a few reports of what I found from an email, threat perspective, identity threat perspective, and generally, if there are any data threats that you also have, we will come and show you. So let me talk a little bit about what this threat workshop is all about. In a very simple way, when we send you the feedback form at the end, you just tick in and say that I'd like to have this run. And what happens is that, again, we set up a 1 hour meeting with you first, and we launch you into what the security workshop is all about. We'll define the scope and get what are we going to do, what you have to do, etc. It's a very, 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 very hands-off workshop. Let me tell you, in the terms of there's not like some massive teams have to get involved here. No, we just tell you what you need to run. Next, we then download the threat check license. As partners, we have access to the threat check license and attach it onto your tenant. Again, Microsoft driven. Uh, there's no third-party tools that we are using here, and we let it run for about 2 weeks, and that's the standard timeline that we talk about, because we get a baseline behavior of all of these things over that 2 week period. We collect some of the reports, and then we come back and spend maybe about half an hour to 45 minutes with you, saying here's what we've analyzed, here's what we think, this is what was happening in the last 2 weeks in your organization from an email perspective, from an identity perspective, and from a data perspective. And here is what we think are some of the solutions you could adopt, right? And we just leave you with that. Again, no commitments to buy anything, but this is just to show you that some of y'all are coming up for refreshes of your current, your O365 or M365. You don't have to wait for the renewal sometimes, because you can add on all of these little products that you want at any point of time in the circle. So this is just a quick overview of what we're going to run the security workshop with. And briefly, what are the objectives? Very simply, we are here to discover threats in your environment, specifically around Office 365 or the M365 around email, identity, and data. And we'll also tell you and help you understand how we can mitigate those threats for you. That's the objective. What is the approach? So we're going to use, like I said, the security threat check tool. And specifically, we are using the Azure Active Directory identity protection and cloud app security to find out identity threats, the ATP to understand email and data along with CASB. We'll find out threats in these 3 areas for you, and we will recommend, right, based on what we've seen, what are some of the things that you can add on if you want, right? The outcomes are really a threat check results report. So these are actual live reports that we will pull out and share it with you itself. And again, it is with your permission. It's not that I have access to your tenant at all. Absolutely not. If you wish to get those reports yourself without getting involving us, we are perfectly fine. But your administrator, it's through the tenant itself where we pull out these reports and analyze it with you, right? So we need to see the reports at some point. You can redact names if you don't want us to see that, because we would want to be able to recommend what you need to do next, right? So what is out of scope is things like we are not going to come in and look at your entire network level security and start talking about design and implementations, nothing of that. We are looking at your O365, M365 tenant, and we're going to tell you very clearly what we observe as threats from an identity, from an email, and from a data perspective, right? So that's really the objective. So I thought I'll show a few reports just for you to get a sample of, okay, if you're going to run this, what can I see, right? So for example, here is a threat actually that's found out by Azure Active Identity Protection, right? So if I just zoom in a little bit, can I see that, Kiran? Are you able to see it?
No, sir. Still, it's not yet zoomed in.
Okay. So maybe I won't zoom it in. Are you seeing the boxes coming up?
Yeah, box came up, sir.
So basically, this threat will tell me in terms of what are the high-risk users, right? When I say high-risk users, chances are that these users, their identity has been compromised, right? When I say compromised, Microsoft's intelligent security graph, which is their basic cybersecurity threat division there, has found out, let's say, your CFO's email and credentials are available in the darknet, right? So I'm spotting that and coming back and telling you that your CFO's email address, I mean, that credential is now becoming a high risk, number one. Two is it could be a very, unprotected, risky sign-in, right? Uh, this is something that we believe that the user did not do, right? And somebody's trying to come in. It could be that I'm detecting that somebody is logging in from Bangalore right now at 3:15, and then in 5 minutes I see another login happening from Singapore, and I'm beginning to think that that was not something that you authorized, right? So I will give you that heads up as well. Then I will find out that there are certain, authentication and protocols that you're using which are very legacy, right? Very old, because you need to move away from that simply because I will not be able to, or you will not be able to sort of implement things like multi-factor authentication, etc. And of course, I will also give you a quick snapshot. This is again from an identity perspective with the cybersecurity unit working at the back. We kind of give you this on your tenant for the period that we are there. Okay. Second, I can also then quickly tell you in terms of during the period of the engagement, maybe it's 14 days, I will tell you from an email perspective what were the key threats. Right over here, you'll find out. I mean, I don't want to zoom it in because I think it's not happening, but you will find out that I will show you that all the different type of malwares that are hitting you, and every day what was the different types of malware that were coming into your system, right? And if I then I can also tell you, for example, over the period of engagement that we were with you, we saw something like 1,338 attempts. So that's the 1,338 attempts over here. And every day, let's say the JS numcod, Trojan was the highest in each of the days that we looked at. And if anybody knows about this numcod, it's nothing but a Trojan. You click on it, it then basically installs ransomware and malware into your organization, right? Or into that end user's machine. So really a Trojan, and somebody's been actually firing this at you all, right? So there's somebody trying to make an attempt, and we are basically able to see that there's been an average of one attempt per person, right? So we will show you that report. And then I will also be able to show you things like suspicious sign-in activities, right? So if you look at it, and this is part of the cloud app security piece of the puzzle, I'm just going to try and zoom in. If you can just tell me whether this works, I'll know. I've just zoomed in and tell me whether it's worked.
No, sir, it's not working, sir.
Okay, so I won't do that, sorry. So basically what I'm saying is CASB will detect that there's some malware that has been tried to be uploaded into your systems, number one. CASB will detect, for example, that there is an activity from a Tor IP address. Tor, as you know, somebody's using a Tor browser to hide their IP addresses, and somebody's trying to log in from there, right? There is this impossible, travel activity, the one that I just spoke about, right? I'm seeing that there has been, that they've been attempted to sign in from two different locations, which are just not possible to do in the time frame that they're talking about. And again, maybe I see malware detection. So CASB is basically able to see this is all happening in your cloud account. So things like OneDrive, somebody's trying to put stuff there, example, right? And CASB is able to have an API connection to other cloud applications as well. Yeah, but for the purposes of this particular analysis, we'll be talking about your OneDrive content, right? If somebody's trying to hit you out there. So we can find that out. I also find out suspicious activity. So for example, over here, we have the credential of a user, and this gentleman's name is Stefan. He's probably the administrator. The first alert we get that there was an impossible travel activity happening from Stefan. So somebody was trying to log in from two geographically distant locations, right? And that failed. Next, there was again attempt on from Stefan, but there was a login that was actually happening from a Tor IP browse, Tor IP address, right? And this was a successful login that happened. And then we find out that he uploaded one file and two files, and these were two malware detected files that were uploaded into the OneDrive, for example, right? So I'm able to show you these reports, right? And that's what's happening over here. So these are just a few, but there's a whole lot of about 15 to 20 reports that we can walk you through. Again, we're trying to classify threats around email, identity, and data. That's what we're going to come. And at the end of the day, once we see those reports and once you're able to share that with us, we will then be able to recommend to you Microsoft solutions that help you to mitigate the threats on identity, mitigate the threats on email. When I say email, it's about those unsafe attachments, unsafe links that come in, right? And we would have spotted that people were trying to come in, for example, like that numcod and the Trojans, right? What is our mitigation strategy for Microsoft? We can talk about those things, and even your data, for example, right? What are some of the mitigation things that we can bring in? And each of these elements I'm going to talk a little bit about. That's why I'm not going to spend time talking right now. But this is what the whole workshop is all about, right? So that's the security workshop. It, like I said, begins with an 1 hour update, our first meeting together. We'll share with you what we do. Second is we download the tool, attach it to your tenant. It's again a Microsoft threat check tool. We run it for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, we collect the data. We take 48 hours to reason over that data, and then we call you back and we run you through an hour's workshop of what we found and what are the mitigations, and we leave it with you. Right after that, if you wish to plan and go forward with some of those queues, our teams come in there to help you. So the question somebody says that do we really need this at this time? Like why do I need to run this? And my answer to them is that do you have these answers to you? Let me ask you a question back, right? Are you aware of who's accessing? Right? Are you aware whether the account is compromised or not? When I say account is compromised or not, again, the Microsoft the cybersecurity team, they run something called Azure Identity Protection. I'm not sure how many of you all know that. Because of the fact that Microsoft runs, massive cloud service, massive Xbox, they have something like 6 billion, authentication points that happen literally every month, right? So they have a lot of telemetry data and they know what's going on fairly largely in that network. And of course, they participate in a lot of other forums as well. They get to know when credentials are available, right? You'll be wondering, what do you mean by account compromised? How are you supposed to know that? You and I will not know that. But the fact is that moment we get onto these services, there is somebody watching a back who will pop up and tell you, this guy's, the CFO's credential is, compromised. And if you get in some of these tools, based on that condition, you can then do a lot of things. You can respond to that. We'll talk about that, right? So do you know where your user is based? Which app is being accessed? Is the device healthy? Is it a compromise? Is it a jailbroken one, etc.? And how do I protect my corporate files and mobile devices? I don't want them to even save it on an SD card or save it on the card, but I want to be able to protect it. So the question is, do you have answers for all of this, right? And the thing is, we have a set of tools that we can talk to you about, right, to address all of this. And the answer is that yes, we do have these tools. And I'm going to talk to you about the next maybe 20 minutes about what are the tools that can come in. Again, this is post the Microsoft security workshop that we've done with you. This is just to give you an idea of what are the tools and implements that you have in the arsenal to mitigate the threats that we're going to find. So when I say adopt at your own pace, I mean, that's a very cute picture of the hare and the tortoise. The point is that each one's use case is very different. Each one's threat areas are very different. So you can adopt it at the pace that you want, or you can take the whole big bang approach and have everything go. Again, it depends on your use case. So if I talk about what are these tools that are there to mitigate all these threats that you see, I want to begin with the first obvious one, right? The Windows 10. This is making sure that your endpoint device operating system is really, really rock solid, because it starts literally from there, right? I mean, forget the device, could be any device that you have, but in a sense, at the end, from a corporate point of view, maybe you're running Windows, right? So can we move up to a very, very, very secure Windows 10? And again, from Microsoft, they have two versions available. You may have heard about the Windows 10 E3, and I'm going to talk about interesting things about this, E3 and E5, right? So you just might want to start up and tune up all of those places, all of those endpoint devices with a very rock solid, secure operating system. Once you've done that, right, you might then say that, hey, you know what? I like the single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and all that good stuff we spoke about. So can I just do that? And the answer is yes. You can just do that piece of the puzzle. Or if you say that, hey, I also wanted to manage the endpoint devices and I want to manage that mobile app and mobile device, can you do that? And absolutely, want to add that on, you can, right? Again, these are all individual pieces of the puzzle that you want. And I like the fact of this information leakage protection that you spoke about. Can I start there? You can, right? And of course, this whole thing of CASB, right? The cloud access security broker, and making sure that based on your identity, right, I make sure that all your content is safe everywhere. Surely you can, right? So again, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? These are really the 5 tools, if I have to talk about, apart from a couple of other things, but main 5 tools are this, right? If you want to do the whole shebang at one go, right? Obviously, this is enterprise mobility and security is nothing but these 4 products marketed together as one, and obviously makes a lot more sense. We'll see what that pricing looks like. If you buy them all together, obviously you're going to get a much better price, right? And then what is Microsoft 365? Some of you all already have that, but those who are on O365, if they want to ever move on to these combined bundle, it's really the Windows 10. It's already your existing Office and EMS combined together in a plan for you, right? So this is not really any new product. This is more of a bundling, right? So there are 2 broad bundles. Then we're going to see that the Microsoft 365 Business is typically for organizations who have 300 users or less, right? And so don't think that, I need to be big to implement this. You don't. And Microsoft has really made pricing pretty aggressive there. We'll talk about that. And for the larger enterprises on the call, as you know, you probably have an E3 plan, and if you're not, you might want to go to M365, move from Office to M365, and we have an E3 and E5 plan there. So I'm going to talk about, these are the three things that we're really going to spend the next 15 minutes with, right? To give you an idea of things. So if I look at the first one, honestly speaking, I was very surprised. I think last year when we went into Windows 10 big time, because I don't know how many of you all know that Windows 10 is actually a virtualized, is built on a virtualized platform. There's Hyper-V underneath your Windows 10. And the reason why Microsoft did that is simply because they wanted to isolate those different workloads. So your code, your internal OS and kernels are on one side. Any application that you load is straight away sort of, surrounded by another virtual machine. It's basically you're running multiple VMs over there in your Windows 10. So Windows 10 has security pieces which deal with the pre-breach part of any plan. So pre-boot compromise, so it has device protection there. It has Windows Defender, which talks about threat resistance. Your stolen credentials, it has this two-factor authentication, your Windows Hello, face recognition, etc. And data theft, right? It's basically able to do your encryption so that even if somebody gets hold of your laptop and desktop, they're not going to be able to get any sense of that data, right? So the Windows 10 E3 plan encompasses the pre-breach part of this puzzle that I just spoke about, right? And for people who want to then do a little bit of forensics, that people have come in and I want to go quickly back and see what all has been compromised, the E5 has something called Windows Defender ATP, the advanced threat protection, which actually gets into those patterns and tells me what all is going wrong, right? So Windows 10 E3 and E5 is all of this good stuff. But here's the interesting bit of the puzzle, and this is more of an insertion recently. Your Windows 10 E3 or E5 allows you or entitles you to run Windows virtual desktops on Azure. What do I mean? So what Microsoft will look after is this whole virtual desktop infrastructure orchestration layer, everything to do with the management, the broker, the gateway, all of that stuff. I call it as the orchestration piece for VDI, right? If you have a Win 10 E3, and I'll talk about some of the other SKUs that automatically entitle you to it, you can spin virtual desktops in Azure, right? And the best part of it is that it is completely paid for already in your Windows 10 E3 E5 licenses. So this is something, for example, and secondly, the other interesting part about the Windows Virtual Desktop is, I do not know how many of you all know that Windows 10 Enterprise has something called multi-session, which is only available in their desktops in the cloud, virtual desktops in the cloud. What do I mean by Windows 10 multi-session? If, for example, I have 10 members, right, and I want them to all have 10 virtual desktops because of this problem that we're having right now, I want them to log on using a browser, get onto their desktops. I can say that if depending on the workload or the profile of the users, I can say that 3 or 4 people, very light users, can all multi-session into a single Windows 10 virtual desktop over there. So maybe my crowd of 10, or let me just say 12, just for purposes of maths, 4, 4, and 4, right? All of these three sets, maybe your finance, your sales, or OFG, very light users. And I can have 4 of them actually logging onto one Windows virtual desktop. So technically speaking, to service 12 people, right, and give them an impression that each of them have their desktops, I just need to stand up 3 Windows 10 multi-session virtual desktops at the back. So each Windows 10 virtual desktop will be servicing 4 people. I'm not sure many of you all knew that. I didn't know that. Very happy to see that, right? I'm also very happy to see that in Azure, right, we will also be able to support Windows 7 Enterprise for you and give you a full desktop, right? So this part of the puzzle is completely with you. You can provision full VDI desktops, or if it's only apps that you want to stream, all that good stuff is available. And you are in charge of your image, whatever is the golden images you're making, what is the user density, network policies, all this good stuff is on your side of the house, right? So what is included is the Windows virtual desktop orchestration piece in your license. What you will pay for is obviously the Azure burn, right? Those 3 VMs that you're taking, servicing 12 people, whatever is the consumption of CPU, memory, and storage, you will pay for that. But guess what? You now have a virtual desktop being completely run off Azure, which you're entitled to run. And in this pandemic situation, when there are certain people that have to go back and work from home, I'm able to spin them up in Azure, right? And make sure that they come in much more peacefully than rather trying to do an IPsec VPN into my office, right? IPsec we know is horrible in terms of the end user quality of experience. So people are trying to get away from IPsec and RDP, right? So This is something that I wanted to keep in mind, that Windows 10 license allows you to do that. And which are the other qualifying SKUs for this? So if you have a Microsoft M365 E3 or E5, for example, or you have the Business Premium Edition, or you have Windows 10 Enterprise E3, E5, you are entitled to run Windows Virtual Desktops. Okay, so Windows 10, E3 and E5, like I said, the difference over here in the red line at the bottom is more the post-breach scenario. So a lot of pre-breach controls, right? Virtualization rights, the WVD speak that we spoke about, all of that good stuff is available to you, right? So secure endpoint, that's the number one. Remember, I said 3 buttons. This is where you can start if you want, right? The second piece of the puzzle is the EMS piece, the enterprise mobility and security piece. And I will introduce you to all of these fours very, very quickly. Remember, you can pick up each of them independently if you want. Again, depends on where you want to start, right? So if I look at Microsoft's enterprise mobility and security EMS, primarily comprises of these 4 broad blocks: identity and access management, mobile device and mobile app management, information protection, and the threat detection. So let me just start with very quickly. I'm not going through all the features of it. There's maybe interesting ones. If somebody is going to take Azure AD, Azure Active Directory, Premium, this is what you can try and do with it. Azure AD allows you to very, very quickly set up a single sign-on for your organization for all its apps, right? So remember that talk about users lying with passwords everywhere, completely avoidable. SSO, set it up, very easy, get going. So with one click, I can access all my 30, 40 applications that I want, right? Second, I then want to, you talked about conditional access, right? Depending on who the user is, where is he coming from, which device he's using, right? Have I found his credentials in the darknet, etc., etc., etc. I want to be able to, when I say I, the service is going to be able to see whether this user is at risk because of his credentials issue, or the session is at risk because he's coming from places which you're not authorized. I can then take the following actions. Depending on the level of risk of the user or session, I can allow him, or I can require a multi-factor authentication because I have a slight doubt of who he is. Or I can force a password reset if I know that his credentials are in the dark web, deny access or limit access, right? I mean, these are the options that are available in Azure AD, the single sign-on story, right? A lot of other features there, about close to 25, 30, all that thing about impossible travel, finding your credentials in the dark web, all of that good stuff is coming from Azure Identity. Next, very simply, I need to now manage endpoint devices and the application management, and that's where the Intune piece of the puzzle comes in. It's the second element in EMS. You can buy these separately, remember, but when they come together, they work very, very well. So your job will be what? To handle company managed devices, which means I can literally manage the device and the apps because I'm authorized to do that. Or it's employee managed, where they may not like you handling the device, but I can probably protect my corporate applications on their endpoints, or it could be third party or contractors who are logging into your environment. How do I manage that? So Intune is all about the MDM story, starting from enrolling to provisioning to retiring. Similarly for the apps, for me to do over the air sort of updates, push out application profiles, etc. So you need to have a console from where you can manage all of this. And that is really what Microsoft's Intune does for you, right? Third, a little bit about information protection. If you remember, I talked about Azure information protection background. The first one is what we call as information rights management. That is, as an end user, if I want to send any data across to either inside my organization or outside, I should be able to sort of do a certain policy on it and do some amount of tracking on that document. That means the rights go with the document, flow with the document wherever it is. So things like I can even revoke a document. I can, once it's sent to somebody, I can make sure he doesn't forward it, he doesn't print it. A lot of those interesting things I can do. But then remember, I said I also want to do it. I don't want to leave it to the judgment of the end user. I might want to classify that document, label it, and have actions according to it. So that's the Azure Information Plan 2, which allows you to do that. So all of AIP puzzles comes together, and starting from classifying, labeling, encrypting, access, do the policy enforcement and all of that good stuff comes as part of the Azure Information Protection Plan 2. And what you see at the bottom left-hand side are the labels that we can attach depending on the sensitivity of the data. So if I find that data, as he's typing out a proposal, he's probably sharing some information that he shouldn't be, I will automatically create those business labels. And moment I create that business label, there is a policy enforcement policy that gets activated at the back so that you are clear he's not going to push out stuff or he doesn't want to print stuff, etc., etc. Right? So that's what AIP does. Again, I'm just giving you a brief snapshot, right? And the last part of it is the threat detection. And there we have something called Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics, or ATA. And what is ATA? ATA basically says for 21 days, I will observe all your users and the way they behave on the network, right? So if I know that Ajit logs in using, let's say, an HP laptop, and he comes in the morning and he hits O365, he hits an HR portal, and that's really his work because he's really an HR person. But suddenly out on the 22nd day, I find he's coming with a Sony laptop and he's logged in. He's gone to O365, but he's suddenly gone to the M&A server. He's gone to the, where we keep our designs, so design server. This is behavior that is not normal of Ajit, right? So I'm going to be able to flag it and basically tell you that these are detections that we are seeing, or behavior anomalies, and we'll flag it for you, right? So that's what the ATA piece does. Similarly, the cloud app security does the same thing for your users' behavior on cloud, right? So in terms of whether they are uploading stuff into OneDrive, they shouldn't be uploading, how are they behaving on the cloud, all of that good stuff is what CASB catches, right? So between ATA and CASB, the activity and behavior of your users on-prem and in the cloud is sort of hemmed in. So this is really what the EMS piece, remember number 2 we are discussing, right? And you can either buy the whole thing at one go and take off like a hair, as I said, or you want to be very deliberate and just pick a few pieces that you want to do. You can certainly do that. And if you remember the circles or the ellipses that we spoke about, that's really the answers to each of those things that you wanted, right? Or to manage my devices, to manage my information, to manage my cloud, I need something to help me out. All of these puzzles come together to do that. So that's number 2. And the third one really is, like I said, it's not a product, it's more of a bundling. So we can talk about, for example, for users who are less than 300, there's a Microsoft 365 business plan, which talks about your identity, securing your devices, securing your apps, email, and documents. So you technically get Office 365. So you get a full-blown O365. You get Teams, you get EMS. Again, there are different functionalities in EMS. You may get a slightly toned down one, and those can be discussed later. But EMS, and you also get a Windows 10 Pro upgrade entitlement. That means if you have Windows 7, Windows 8, once you buy the business plan, you are entitled to upgrade that to Windows 10 Professional at a very, very aggressive price. I'll talk about that later. The other plan, of course, is the enterprise plans, right? And basically, we are talking about this one here, the two reds, the E3 plan. So Microsoft 365 includes everything. Remember, O365, the EMS, and the Windows 10 piece, right? So the E3 plan, and the difference between the E3 and the E5, if you look at it, is really all about this part of the puzzle, the ATA part, some of the cloud PBX conferencing piece, right? All of that, Power BI, for example. What is not there in E3, you'll pick it up in E5 if you need that. As well as, if I look down over here, the EMS, the most advanced version of EMS, remember there's always a plan 1, plan 2, E3, E5. You get a very high degree of EMS protection, and you get the Windows Defender threat protection, that post-breach story that we speak about. So E5 really is the golden SKU, right, to get to. In the E3, you can also add on these later, right? But just the fact that they bunch it together, you'll probably get it at a better price, right? Now, when I say adapt at your own pace, the question is, how much am I going to pay, right? So if I look at Windows 10, this is the offer. We have an E3 plan that goes at $12 per user per month. And on the E5 plan, which is nothing but everything that's there in E3 plus Windows Defender ATP, right, is at $18 per user per month. So you can start there if you want. That's one. Second, pricing. We're talking about pricing now. EMS. If you look, I'm showing you the individual prices for identity and access management, right? Remember, I talked about this plan 1, plan 2, right? In each of these functional areas, there are plan 1, plan 2. So you can buy them separately. Again, these are per user per month, right? But if you add up, for example, if you take all the E3 versions, that's the plan 1 versions, 875 per month, or you take the full SKU, which is EMS 5, which basically includes the plan 2 everywhere. If you add it up, actually, so this is $9 plus, let's say 6 is $15 plus 5 is $21 plus 3.5 is about 24, 25, about 30 odd dollars is coming to you at about $15 a month, right? So obviously it is a sort of a marketing packaging, which makes sense to basically get the entire EMS suite at a fantastic price. And you should look at it. If it makes sense to you, why not? Right? So the Microsoft EMS piece, plan E3, E5, if you want to just pick that piece of the puzzle and move, that's what you see, right? For the people who are on, I'm coming to the Microsoft plans, the business, the Microsoft 365 plans. The business, you have a choice, right? You have the basic, which is $125 a month. And what do you get? You get Office apps, but it's a web version of the Office apps. You get Exchange, 50 GB mailbox. You get a OneDrive, 1 TB. You get SharePoint, and obviously you get Teams, right? If you want a rich version of Office apps, that is, you want to download it to 5 devices, then it goes to 660 rupees a month. And again, remember, the limit over here is 300 users, and you get all those services as well, right? Obviously, the golden plan or the sweet spot here is the business premium piece, which is 1320 a month. Again, not much when you think what you're getting, right? You're basically getting the whole Office story. You're getting all of this stuff, plus you're beginning to get in tune and you're going to get that information protection piece that I spoke about, right? All of that gets bundled here. And if you just want to start with Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint on a pay per user per month, right? And obviously I want to get OneDrive because I want to store that document. You can actually have that at 545 rupees a month. So these are wonderful plans depending on how you want to break it. And you don't have to take 300 of everything. You can take 150 of this, you can take 200 of that. All of that great stuff is possible, right? If I look at the enterprise plans, enterprise, like again I said, is M365 E3, which has the Office 365 E3, the Windows 10 E3, and the EMS E3 plan that we just saw. Put them all together, right? It's going to come to close to about 34, 35 bucks. But when you buy it as an E3 plan, it's $26 per user per month. And obviously here is the E5 plans, or the best plans right across, right? You get it at $48 per user per month, right? So when I say adapt at your own pace, this is what I mean, right? Start with Windows if you want to just tighten up the endpoints. You want to bring EMS separately, nothing to do with Windows, but I just want EMS, you have that choice. Or if you want a combination of Windows, Office 365 and EMS, we have those plans available to you, right? So coming to my last slide, I just want to mention that start point for all of this, for us to understand your O365 and M365 tenants, is really that security threat workshop. And I want to say that each one's, I would say, use cases we understand are going to be very different. You may want to start with endpoint protection. You may want to start with data leakage issues. You might want to just do that single sign-on multi-factor. That's perfect. So we actually post that, come and do a use case analysis with you, because once you know the tools, that's fine. But if this is what I want to get done, which are the tools do I need to bring together to get it done, right? So that's the point that we're trying to make. Little bit about us for a lot of y'all who may not know New Wave. So we are a 21-year-old organization. And the best way to understand that is that we offer solutions around the edge, the core, and the cloud piece, right? Product solutions and services. We are very southbound, right? So we've got our operations in Chennai, Bangalore, Kochi, Hyderabad. Very young team, and close to about 185 to 190 people now. And we've had the privilege of to serve close to about 2,000 or plus customers. I think this slide will really allow you to understand us. So we believe that our customers are going through one of these transformation journeys, whether it's a workforce transformation or IT or security or digital. When I say workforce, I'm talking about everything to do with the edge, the endpoint devices, the modern workplace piece, the EMM speak that we're speaking about, work from home solutions, etc. If I talk about the IT transformation, very much around the data center pieces. So in terms of your converged infrastructure, hyper converged, moving people away from tape-based backup to, the next level of backup that we're talking about, as well as helping customers to set up, their private clouds, and also having solutions in the public cloud, right? Azure or AWS. Security is all good things with our partnership with Fortinet, right? So if anybody has perimeter, endpoint, app, NAC solutions, all that good stuff is there. We have a team that manages that separately. And over the last 9 months in October is when we signed on with Automation Anywhere to start offering these robotic process automation for a lot of the organizations, right? And we really do that on the shoulders of wonderful partners that we have, right? So none of this would be possible without those OEMs backing us. And all of these relationships, I would say most of them, barring a few, like automation is fairly new. Fortinet is fairly new for us, but most of them go back to at least 15 years plus, which means that, as an organization, we do know senior folks inside these OEMs. So when push comes to shove and you have something that needs to be attended to, we know who to call, right? That's really the advantage or the value that you want to see from a partner. We also have this whole thing underpinned by our services. So whatever solution you see out here, we take the pre-sales, we sell, we do the post-sales completely ourselves, right? So system integration services is what we're really, really good at. Availabilities in terms of AMCs that you want us to come, we have a separate services team that deals with it, whether it's short-term, long-term residency, whatever you want, right? Talk to us. And we do something beyond just the Microsoft piece is what I wanted to share with you. So with that, I've just come to the end of this 45 minutes that we had together. I hope it was useful. And when the feedback form reaches you, please just tick in so that you want to opt in for the security threat workshop. I think it's a great visibility back into your, again, your M365 or O365 tenant, not your whole network. And let's see from an identity, email, and data perspective. If you're good, great. If you're not good, we have the tools. And like you've just seen just now, you can buy them at your own pace. You don't have to buy everything at one go. Start from where you have a problem. So with that, I complete. So Kiran, back to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adit sir. I think that was a damn useful session. And now we will open up for a Q&A session, sir, and request all the customers who have any queries about this program or the assessment that you want to post questions to our speaker, you can do so. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
And the reason we kept it in a meetings, we didn't do a live event because we thought we'll have it a little more closer, smaller group, right? So please go ahead and ask any questions. I hope I can answer. If not, I'll get back to you. That's fine. So I will get the cloud team to call each of you all, obviously to thank you in person, and maybe at that time you can probably raise questions with them. I urge you to run the security threat workshop because I feel at this time you want to be safe, especially at this time, and I just need to know if anything's happening on my network or in my tenants, and if so, then I want to plug some of those things. And this is a good time as any, to be honest, to get even the price points that you want, as you're aware, because everybody is going to be very hungry to be able to service you, right, in terms of business. So it's a great time to have this workshop, right? So Kiran, I think we can conclude it. So I will just hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adit sir, and thank you all for joining us today here and making this webinar a successful one. Right after we log off, I'm going to send you a thank you email, and you will have a link to take feedback. I mean, to give your feedback on today's webinar topic. Please choose how you want to go forward with this program. So, thank you so much. Have a nice day ahead. Thank you once again.
Thank you.